and welcome to Diecast Restos. I'm Jason, and today I have this Majorette number 230 Renault 4 van in for a custom. The little fourgonette was in production between 1975 and 1982. The real Renault 4 was produced from 1961 until 1994, with over 8 million produced. Here's a mint example of the casting with the same decals. And this is a Renault service van I'll be basing my custom on. The model possesses quite a trifecta. Produced by French manufacturer Majorette, it was made in France and is based on a French vehicle. As with most Majorette models of this era, it came in an array of colours and designs. Between 1975 and 1978, it was yellow with PTT decals, Poste, Télégraphe et Téléphone, the French Post and Telecoms Administration. Wheel designs also varied. Between 1979 and 1980, red and orange castings had fire department tampos. From 1979 to 1981, it was again painted yellow, now with service Renault decals. Lastly, 1981 to 1982 models were blue or dusty blue, with telephone decals similar to those seen on the early castings. There are probably more variations, but that is what Majorette Wiki has listed. So now let's get rid of this blue paint. Introduced in 1961 as a replacement for the 4CV, the Renault 4 was built in response to Citroën's 2CV. Renault were able to benefit from the 13 years of knowledge gained since the 2CV's initial launch, while ironing out any negatives. The 2CV had been designed in the 1930s to help make motoring more accessible for those on low incomes or those living in rural areas. Since then, infrastructure had vastly improved. While the 2CV was a popular city car due to its affordability and economy, it had become outdated with its maximum speed of 43 miles per hour. By the 60s, the styling was showing its age and the economic situation in France was improving. A project to replace the rear-engined Renault 4CV started in 1956. It would retain the versatility of the 2CV for rural use in France and abroad. It had a large platform chassis and a separate body. The body was simple and had minimal equipment, with a large cargo area and removable seating. It utilised a 4-cylinder water-cooled engine, unlike the 2CV's air-cooled 2-cylinder unit, offering greater performance and refinement. At launch, Renault offered the identical Renault 3 and Renault 4. The R3 had a 603cc engine which slotted into the 3CV tax bracket, while the R4 was equipped with larger engines upwards of 26.5 horsepower. The R3 was short-lived, being shunned by customers despite its lower tax bracket and cheaper price than the 2CV. It was discontinued along with the most Spartan of R4s in October 1962. A quick break from history here as I'm priming my custom wheels for this project ready for painting later. Another issue Renault acknowledged was the 3-speed manual transmission that was developed for the car. Critics described it as obsolete compared to the 4-speed manual of the 2CV. It was required to allow for a flat floor across the width of the cabin. Originally, synchromesh was only available on the upper 2 gears, but Renault modified the gearbox to allow for synchromesh on all 3 gears in 1962. The 4 received a 4-speed transmission from 1968. Interestingly, the 4 had a shorter wheelbase on the left than the right side, because the rear wheels were not mounted directly opposite one another. This was due to the torsion bars being mounted one behind the other. There were numerous versions of the Renault 4. The Plein Air was a roofless and doorless model designed for the French Army in 1964. The military contract didn't materialise, however, so Renault and co-developer Sinpar attempted to ride the wave of beach buggy-styled vehicles of the late 60s. Appearing in 1968, only 563 were built, as it proved to be more expensive and less capable than Citroën's Serie. The plein air was discontinued in 1970. This casting is based on the panel van, a fourgonnette. It was hugely practical, with its high cube rear and unique Girafon giraffe hatch. The van remained on sale in Europe until 1993, when it was replaced by the Renault Express, itself based on the second generation Renault 5. The 4's demise began in Europe in the 80s due to emissions and safety regulations. Competitors offered more advanced products, while Renault themselves were already experiencing great success with Le Car, the Renault 5. There were several projects designed to replace the 4. However, its continuing successful sales and need to upgrade the 5 in the mid-80s meant that its eventual entry-level replacement did not arrive until 1992. This was the Renault Twingo. Between 1961 and 1992, over 8 million Renault 4s were built. They were assembled in France, Algeria, Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, Colombia, Ireland, Italy, Mexico, Morocco, Portugal, Spain, Uruguay and Yugoslavia. In the latter, they continued to be produced in Slovenia until 1994. So that was a brief rundown through the history of the Renault 4. Meanwhile, I've begun customization with a white base coat painted, with a line taped and clear coated, ready for the yellow lower half. I've painted my custom wheels silver, given the grille a gloss coat, drawn in the rear view mirror and wipers, filled in a black registration plate on the base, which I'm about to draw the lettering in with silver, and coloured the headlights yellow. I did this because in France, legislation was brought in 1937 that required headlamps emit yellow light. The reason was that yellow lamps reduced glare and reduced fatigue. The yellow lamps compared to regular white lamps reduced intensity by about 18%. Many other countries ran tests, but these generally failed to show any advantage in favour of the yellow lamps. Despite this, yellow lamps remained mandatory in France until 1992. Perfectly aligning with the timeline of the Renault 4 coincidentally. Now here I'm adding on the tape for the central black strip that will separate the white and yellow halves of the Renault service van design. I need to say now I really should have just applied a decal instead of going to all this effort to paint it in. But here goes anyway. Not before I spray some clear coat to seal any gaps within the tape. Then on goes Tamiya's TS14 Black. I'm not expecting perfection, but let's see how it goes. After 2 coats of black, I can finally unravel the tape to reveal the results. Here's where my problems really begin. You can already see some of the leaks that have occurred along the casting lines. This left hand side is particularly bad, but I can fully survey the damage once all the tape has gone. So here it is, not something to be proud of, but was this something that could be fixed? As I said, the left was far worse than the right, which had looked more manageable. Is it something that could be rectified with detailing and some correcting? I asked myself, what do I do now? I hated the thought, but should I go back to the drawing board and start again? I decided that my best bet was to try and fix the issues head on, then ask you guys what you think of the end result. That way, if you hate the final product, I could try it again. The trouble is, I like a challenge, but I'm also a bit of a that'll do bodger. Plus, the thought of all those wasted hours painting, clear coating and drying being undone really irked me. So there was only ever going to be one route I took with this project, rightly or wrongly. I'm very aware this will not be my finest effort, and I'm okay with that. I think it's healthy to share both my wins and my losses. So I have touched up the yellow paint by spraying out some of the rattle can into a plastic shot cup and applied it with a brush to fill in those casting lines. I've then used my black paint pen to draw in the front registration plate, grille beneath the windscreen, and fuel filler cap. I then used chrome to add in a base layer for the front turn signals, rear light clusters, bumpers and door handles. Next I added in the silver registration plate lettering before supplying some colour to the lights with some red and orange Sharpie. To cover over my imperfections, I really have to go hard on the Citadel Gloss and Uln Oil this time, really defining those panel lines. This will help define that giraffe hatch too that I mentioned earlier. The giraffe hatch is that upper section you can see above the door that I'm running over now. I've printed some Renault decals for the sides of the cube section of the van that I apply first. I downloaded the same font Renault used during this period to create these genuine replica decals. After rolling out the main Renault decal, I apply the more generic Renault service decals for the doors. Often this would be the address of the garage the van belonged to, though I have seen real replica or tribute fourgonnettes with Renault service written in this position instead. Both decals are sealed with Mr. Mark's softer solution before the van receives yet another coat of clear. So here are all of the parts that make up the Majorette Renault 4L. The window unit connects to the interior at the headlights first of all. This then slots into the body at the grille opening. Lastly, the base with suspension and wheels already in place connects at the rear registration plate with a screw securing the front. So here's how my Majorette 230 Renault 4L van looked to start off. My intention had always been to replicate the popular Renault service vans in their distinctive white, yellow and black livery. However, I made this more difficult than it should have been. I rather foolishly chose to paint the black strip on rather than use a decal, and I've paid the price with a messy paint job and wasted a ton of time. So let's take a look at this 4L after it's been through hell. I've tried to rectify the sloppy paint job by touching up the yellow and concealing it with Citadel. The left looks far worse than the right, and zoomed in like this, it looks terrible. I really don't know what I was thinking painting on the black belt. But positives, I think the design philosophy works. The wheels match well, the decals look pretty authentic, and I'm quite pleased with how the registration plate turned out. I'm going to learn a lot of lessons from this build, and as such I'm glad I at least tried to rectify it rather than scrap it. But I guess it's a fourgonnette conclusion that I'll be redoing this one, depending on what you guys have to say of course. Let me know your opinions in the comments. If you don't like the result, or if you're feeling generous, please leave the video a like, and I promise the next one will be better. But thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.